So I finally got round to starting the ram skull sculpture designed by Joshua De Lisle. Now I've had the plans for a while but just haven't had time to get round to doing it. So this is going to be a two-part video because it's quite involved, quite long, and I personally don't like long videos, so I'm keeping them quite short, or relatively short. I think they're about 20 minutes or so each. So the first thing you've got to do is go to Joshua's Etsy site and download the plans. Now he's been very kind and he's offered us a discount code of 20%. Now I shall put the link in the description below. If you click on that link, it should take you directly to the right page and automatically apply the discount. Now if it doesn't, I will also put the code itself down there so that if you get to checkout and find it hasn't added your discount, you can just use the discount code. So that's the first thing you've got to do. So you download the plans, print them out to whatever scale you like, because you can scale this, but I've done it to full scale. And Joshua recommends that you print it out and actually make a paper pattern first. Now that will alleviate a lot of the problems I had because I didn't do that. I didn't even think about it. It was only when I spoke to Joshua afterwards, telling him the problems I was having, he said, well, you know, I do recommend making a paper pattern first. So there you go, it's my fault, my bad. So, you can make your paper pattern out of stiff card or whatever you've got to hand. That will give you all the right angles, dimensions, gaps, all sorts of things that I ran into problems with. So, first thing we've got to do is choose your metal. I'm using 1.6 16 gauge, which is a pretty decent size. It's slightly trickier to weld, but it is easier to manipulate. So that's up to you. That's your choice. So let's chat. Let's get on with it. We'll start with the cutting out. So I've decided to use my bandsaw purely because I've got it. You can do this multitude of ways. You can even send the plans off and get them laser cut, but just for this one off I decided to do it with the bandsaw. Now my blade doesn't allow you to go particularly tight. I've slowed down here because this is where my bandsaw actually breaks. I knew something was going to happen, and there it went. So once that was replaced and cracked on, and so it doesn't cut particularly tight radiuses, this big blade. I'd like to try and find a narrower one that will, but I got, like you can see there, 99% of it done. This was the other bit that I had to use the jigsaw for, or the only bit I had to use the jigsaw for, and that's the horns. The bandsaw just would not go tight enough. Right, so there's all the bits cut out, all but the last two horns, because my jigsaw blade is struggling, so I'm going to get some new ones, make life a bit easier to finish those bits off. So that's what you should have before you get started. I did have to touch up a few little bits with the grinder where the bandsaw wouldn't go, like in some of these bits, but the majority of them are as it came off the saw. Now the ideal thing is to keep them labelled once you've taken the paper off, just so you know which bit's which, and to keep them as pairs. So I've got most of the paper off and labelled them, but my biggest fault so far was using this glue. Now it was the cheapest, nastiest bit of spray glue I could find, but it stuck like buggery and I could not get the paper off a lot of these. I've tried grinding it off, I've tried burning it off, I've tried all sorts, and it just will not come off. So I think I'm going to have to get some acetone or something or other on some of these, just to get the residue off. You can see some of them have come up reasonably well. I've managed to get it off. But so I advise you to use a less sticky glue when you stick your pattern on. You can see there I've tried to grind it and it's just spread the glue everywhere. It's got hot and sticky. So let's start with these parts. See, part N is what we're going to start with. This has got to be bent so that part O will actually fit nice and tight in there. You see at the moment it doesn't, it's nowhere near. So we've got to put a bend in there. And then this has got to go on that side. But again, it's got to be bent. So we've got to go in the middle, but we also got to keep those top pieces straight. So I'm going to start on my sandbag. If you've got one of these, it's ideal. If you haven't, you can use, I'm just using a soft mallet, rubber or plastic. We'll see if it works. If it doesn't, I'll have to go to something a bit heavier. But yeah, as I say, if you haven't got a sandbag, you can use a piece of wood with a slot cut in it, a swage block, all sorts of things you could use. I'm using this so that hopefully it won't damage much. It's just starting to go. Little tiny bit, but I need quite a lot more in there. I'll give it some beans. Try not to damage the material too much. So that needs to be a lot smoother than that, which I might try and sort out on the anvil. And these need to be straight, which they almost are. I think I'm going to try and keep that straight as well. It's like 2 of the 3 sides need to be straight, basically. The 2 short sides need to be straight and the long sides need to be bent. See, that's coming closer, but it's still not anywhere near at the moment. So we need to give that a bit more of a go. And that's much more near, much closer. And these bits, as I say, I'm going to try and get much nicer radius in there, much neater, so we haven't got any lumps and bumps. And keeping that one straight. So I've just gone to the anvil and just literally straightened those nicely on the edge of the anvil and kept that radius there. That's the sort of shape you're looking for. Just checking that this one's going to fit quite nicely. Yeah, see, that fits a treat now. That's part O to part N. Nice and flush. I learnt from the horse head that I did, horse head sculpture. Try and get the fit as best you can. Just makes welding and clean up much easier. Right, so now I've got to bend this one to meet that radius there. And you can see it don't. So we'll have a little bit of bash in there. Now obviously you've got to keep these as pairs, so you want to make sure you do one way and one the other way. So this one's got to go that side, so I need to bash it on that side. We've got radiuses all round here. That's getting there, but still not enough. That's much better. Pretty damn good there now. I think if I tacked one end, I could persuade the other end to come round quite nicely. Now the other thing is, you've got to keep these this middle line straight, because it starts off as a radius, but it's got to be actually straight down the middle there. You can see that's not too bad. Pretty much there. And that one just needs a little bit more on that side. These sandbags are really handy for this sort of sheet metal work. I bought that one not long ago actually. I think it was about 10 quid, including delivery. It was an absolute bargain, I thought. So, I'm going to start tacking these together. I'll try and use these magnets. These mag switch magnets are really good. I don't think they're going to be quite good enough for this job. Might hold it. No, not very well. You can see the bottom there isn't quite meeting, so I'm just going to put a few more tacks down. You often find as you tack it will bring it together anyway. See, that's quite nice now. Just that last little bit. Got it. That's nice, good fit that. I'm pleased with that. So now we can try and add those to part N. I'm going to use this magnet this time because this is a bit taller, a bit easier for the job. So I'm going to tack it right in the centre there and then fiddle the edges to fit. Like I say, with the horse head I learnt that the less gaps you can have, the less irregularities, the easier it is in the long run to A, weld, and B, clean up. So I'm trying my best with this one to get them to line up really, really well. Now I've lost something. What have I lost? Oh, it's my screwdriver. I was looking for my screwdriver to give it a little wangle with. I'm just using the top of the magnet to open it up a bit because it's a little bit too full. I'm perhaps spending a little bit too much time trying to get them to line up right, but I really, 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 really hate cleanup, and anything I can do to make it easier I'm going to do. Now I'm tacking all this up with MIG, but I'm going to try and actually TIG it all together this time. I MIG'd the horse head, but although I was only using quite small wire, so I think I was using 0.8 on that, it still left a lot of cleanup. So I'm trying this time to minimise that. So there you go, that's really nice and tight joints. They're fitting nicely. So, next part. Oh, I'm just reiterating how nicely it fits. Yes, I think we get the point, Gary. I'm not sure if that little bit there will need grinding off. It might do. That one side and the same the other side. Slightly long. Now I don't know why that is. That's possibly just inaccuracies in the way I've cut it. Because obviously you've got the width of lines and things to take into account when you're cutting. But it's pretty damn close. So part E. They've got to go in there below D, and again they've got to be bent in two directions. They've got to be bent inwards from there to meet the skull centre, and then they've got to be bent the other way to come out towards the jaw. So we're going to mark it in little lines from the corner. You'll see what I mean in a minute. From the of course I forgot to turn the camera on, so I've done one, tacked it in. You see it goes two ways. It's inwards one side, causing quite an angle there, then a bit of a straight, because this piece has got to stay straight and go on there. Like so. Can't really see it very well, but I think you get the idea. Yeah, that's got to go on there and straight up and down. And then the bottom part has to curl under. So I'll show you on the second part, because I forgot on the first part. You can see what I mean about the lines. I'm using this, just a groove in this wood. Now I've marked it from the corner, from that corner, radiating outwards, and that's the sort of lines I want to see there. It's all pivoting around that corner. I think I'm talking nonsense, but I think you get the idea from watching it. And try not to damage it too much, again putting like little lines in, so I might finish it off once I've got the shape almost there. Just give it a little planish over the beak of the anvil, just to take out any of those little tiny marks, like so. You can just see there's a few tiny little straight lines where I've hit it with that bit of round. So I'm just, this isn't really doing much shaping, it's more just planishing, taking out the marks, and it does define the radius. And as you can see, that bit that I need to keep straight isn't quite, so just straighten that bit out a little bit, and that gives you that angle there. So you've got a bit of a radius, an angle, and then a straight. It's sort of quite a compound curve. I fitted the other one in, and again I forgot to turn the camera on while I put the jaw piece in at the bottom. But once you've got the angle, you see mines aren't quite even both sides, but once you've got it in, you can tweak it around with a pair of pliers or a pair of tongs to get that bottom piece in. Now this is a side piece. I think this is it J or I don't know, I'll look it up in a second. But that's got to stay parallel to the ground, so I've put the jaw on that magnet to keep it upright, exactly sort of 90 degrees, and then the other piece on the top of that magnet to keep it at 90. Now I'm trying to do the same with this side, but of course the bottom one's in the way, so I'm just going to wing it, just going to hold it up, tack it in. It's easy enough to manoeuvre around to get it upright if it's not quite. So there they are, straight up and down. And we're getting there. You can see it's coming. I've just taken the tacks off the top of it there, I'm just trying to do that as I go, just make life a bit easier. So we're going to put start the eye sockets in. Again, I've put them in and forgot to turn the camera on. I've been really bad at that at the moment. Because I haven't done a video for a while, I keep forgetting to turn the blasted camera on. So, but they're very straightforward, those little pieces. I think they're F. They just literally tack in there, straight up and down. And these H have got to follow that line there. So we've just got to put a little radius in them. Again, just using the V cutting a lump of wood. This is a bit of 2x2. Someone was pulling a unit apart next door and skipping all this lovely wood. Just didn't have anywhere to put it, so I just grabbed a few bits and pieces. There you go, it doesn't need a lot. It needs a bit more than that, as you can tell, just a touch more. Now this is sort of some of the pieces where I would have benefited from having a paper mould or model. Done both of them. Just got to tack them on, and you'll see why in a minute. When this goes on, it becomes apparent that the next piece that needs to go on isn't going to fit, because I've got my gaps wrong. I'll get this other side on, and so it will become apparent. Just tacking them from the inside. Right, so you can see the gap at the back there, where this next part I has got to go. Now I know it's got to be bent a little bit. We've got a compound curve system. We've got to keep one bit straight and one bit curved. I think there's 3 sides straight and 1 side curved. This one has got to have the curve in it, and it's got to go in there, and the gap is nowhere near. So it would have been handy to know that before I got that far. It's not that far out, but it was further out. I've actually opened it up a little bit. I was hoping that putting the radius in would shrink it down a bit, but it doesn't. So I've had to quite heavily beat the top of the skull to open it up a bit. It took me quite a while, and that's not working at all, so I'm going to go over onto the wood. So there, we've done that on the wood, kept 1 radius and 3 straights as much as we can. It's still not quite going to go in there, so it's going to need opening up a little bit more, but I think I can wangle it. If I tack one side, I can give it a bit of a tweak with a pair of pliers or a pair of tongs and twist it round. But as I say, when I first offered that up, that gap at the back there was way too small. So I put the skull over a piece of wood and beat the top of part N to open it up a bit. And it was quite tricky. As I say, if I'd had a paper pattern, I would have known that before I got that far. There you go, that one's in. We're getting there. Just got to do the other side. Now that one's in. We're starting to look like a skull. See, that front's not quite right each side. It's a little bit twisted, but I'm hoping I can fandangle that later on. Now this part It's got to go in there. I'm hoping that the angle is the same as it was when I started, having beaten the top. It's about right. It's a little bit open, but we'll see what we can do. And then these K, I think these are, yep, K. They have to go in again the back here, from that corner of the I to that top of N, and you can see there, absolutely nowhere near. So having opened it up to get I in, I now can't get K in, so I've got to bend them right back down again. So I'll close this gap up somehow with a pair of tongs or a hammer, but that's going to be for part 2 because I've had enough for today. So we'll see you on the next one. We're actually getting there.